Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled and honored to be here.
It's so fun to have you back on the show because, of course, our first chat or our last chat was 2020 after your book had come out, The Pleasure Plan. And it was so fun to explore that with you. And we were in such a weird time, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're also in a different weird time now, so
You're
we
right.
won't go into that.
We are still in a weird time. Yes. Yeah, minus pandemic. But yes,
Right.
yes. I'm curious, and of course, I've known you for many years and have watched your journey and seen the unfolding. And I'd love to start by asking people, how has your perspective and take on life shifted as you've entered into midlife and been in midlife for a bit?
Yeah. I feel like midlife is such an opportunity because things start to break down physically. And I think that because of that, it can inspire. If we don't get so dragged down by that, I think it can inspire life changes and evaluation of maybe what we have not been doing that's optimal in terms of our diet, in terms of taking care of ourselves, in terms of nurturing our relationships, in terms of nurturing sorry, different aspects of our relationship. So I think that, yeah, it can be a real opportunity for reflection and then for making positive changes in our lives.
What have you noticed with regard to positive changes? Because I think you're so right. It is a time of many shifts. And, what were you like? Oh, this has been a positive change that I've observed in my life with midlife.
Yeah, it started with the pleasure plan, which really the journey of the pleasure plan was having bedroom issues that were existing, but then they were all exacerbated by perimenopause and then menopause. And so that made me really look closely at my relationship with that part of my life and that part of my body. And it made me examine, what did I know about pleasure? What did I not know about pleasure? What did I know about trauma recovery? Because that's part of my journey. What did I not know about trauma recovery? What did I know about healthy relationships? So it made me really take a deep dive into those areas in terms of intimacy and relationships. But then even beyond that, I have osteoporosis now. And so weight-bearing activities are so good for the body, but now I don't have a choice whether or not, I guess I do have a choice, but the stakes are higher in terms of whether I'm going to do that or not, whether I'm going to prioritize exercise. And so it's all been really empowering for me to take on to accept these things that are, let's say, bummers initially, and then say, oh, this can be helpful in terms of inspiring me to really take care of myself better and to become stronger and to become more erotically alive and yeah, and just more attentive to prioritizing my health and my wellness.
Yeah, I like that idea of erotically alive. I think that's like, listeners are probably like, tell me more. So I'm curious, whenever you think about that, and that probably ties into your whole work around pleasure literacy.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to be more erotically alive in midlife?
Yeah. I break down sensuousness, sensuality, eroticism, and sexuality. I distinguish between these four categories. And it's my own understanding of them, but I have found it personally, and I teach this as well. I found it helpful to just separate them because we use these words interchangeably. And I think when we do, we miss the nuance and the possibility in terms of being alive in these four different ways. So briefly, I'll go through the four, and then focus on the erotically alive part of it. Sensuousness to me is of the senses. It doesn't necessarily have to do with sexuality at all, but it is becoming sensitized to really being able to savor, to enjoy all of the different delights that are available to us through our senses. Then sensuality to me is quite similar, but it's just allowing or inviting our, let's say, sexual self and these parts of the body, we can even say, to go along for the ride. So if I'm having this cup of tea, but I'm experiencing this in a sensual way, then I'm enjoying it through my senses, but I'm also allowing myself perhaps, or inviting myself to maybe get a little stimulated or a little turned on. So sensuality to me is looking for that arousal through the senses. And it may entail different kinds of sensory stimulation, like maybe looking more at touch and different kinds of touch and that kind of thing. Eroticism to me is tapping into nature and the way that sexual reproduction happens comprehensively. So, to me, the best example of sexual reproduction is the flower. And especially now with this early spring, maybe not today, but you can still see the cherry blossoms. But sexual reproduction is that flower going to the bee and other bugs that are going to be part of this ecosystem and survival, saying, "Look at me, aren't I beautiful? Oh, and I smell so great." So it's this, it's attraction, it's attracting to us, but it's also being in that dance of feeling attractive, of attracting to us. It is feeling this energy in on the planet that is really looking, really interested in that which is like popping with this kind of aliveness that's attached to creativity, that's attached to perpetuating ourselves. It's in many ways, it's the epitome of our aliveness, because our aliveness, when it's invested in, right, creating something for the future, to me, that is maybe the most alive we can be. And I think Eros is very much like the guiding principle, or the guiding form of energy that's inspiring that kind of movement, motion. And then sexuality to me is a little more technical in terms of just parts coming together and these sorts of things. So I think that combined, we've got a really nice brew, right? Because you can use sensuousness to help relax and become maybe, so relax and maybe connect to a partner, and then sensuality would mean maybe the next stage if you have a partner, or even if you're with yourself and you want to invite something that feels a little bit more turned on. And then eroticism might be looking for different kinds of stimulation that would be activating more aliveness and connection with that arousal. And then sexuality might be choosing different things that you want to do about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the 4 steps. Thanks for walking us through that. And I'm curious, kind of the next piece I wanted to touch on, which I think ties into this nicely, is creativity and passion. And so you have such a creative life. You have had for years with theater, and you recently hosted the event for the Coterie, and you're such a great storyteller of weaving things in. And of course, you've been a yoga teacher and a sex educator. There's so many things, right? So tell us about your creative journey and your passion and how it has shifted in midlife, if it has shifted.
Yeah, it has shifted because midlife also, it does create a bit of urgency, I think, in terms of realizing ourselves, realizing our potential. That's how it's been for me, how I've interpreted it, and how I use it to say, okay, how much it sounds depressing, but It's just it's just the reality. How much time do I have left here to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish? So I think that's one part of it. That has been one part of it. I have been an artist. If there's one thing I've done that I don't have any regrets whatsoever about, it's that I knew that I was an artist very early on, and I just committed to it. And I never really strayed from that. And it's a difficult life in many ways, but whatever choice we make, there's difficulty.
Yeah.
But the creative life has been something that is, I say I chose to commit to it, but I didn't choose to be an artist. And so I just was being true to myself. And it's taken many turns in terms of what I'm particularly focused on. Like you mentioned, I was in the theater for 30 years, and then I wanted to publish. I wanted to work more on the page than the stage. And so I made that switch. And then I wanted to do public speaking, which was a way of, in many ways, just taking the performance that I was doing and rolling it into something else. And that's been really satisfying and really interesting for me creatively. And now I'm working on a new book. I didn't know if I would ever write another book, but it just came to me to write another book. So part of my mission, my purpose in life is to realize my own potential as a creative person. And so I'm always very dedicated to that, not just to being true to myself as an artist, but to growing, continually growing. And like I said, in midlife, there's more urgency to perhaps say, okay, what are the kinds of projects I would want to do? And I will say one other thing about midlife, which is just confidence, just being able to really not give a darn about about what other people say. What I have found over the years is that when you put something out into the world, people don't necessarily understand it, especially if it's new. And most things are new, right? Where if it's worth anything, we're putting something forth that hasn't been put forth before because it comes from us uniquely. And so yes, there can be all kinds of confusion and maybe even skepticism. No, you should have done it this way or should have done it that way. This happened a lot when I was in the theater. I would write a play and I was doing one person plays and people would say, "Oh, why are you writing about this and that?" I wrote a play called Married Sex. And the play was about trauma recovery, my trauma recovery, but it was about healthy relationships. And people were like, "Oh, why don't you just write about a fun farce about marriage and sex? Why are you putting in this trauma part?" And then other people were saying, "Oh, why don't you just do the trauma and leave out jokes or humor or anything about relationships?" And I was like, no, it's about both of these things. Actually, no, at the time I was like, oh, I wrote the wrong play. I listened to them. And in midlife now, I'm finding that I don't have to listen to these people, that I can contextualize what they're saying and I can take it in and I can use it to help me improve any particular project, but I don't have to take their confusion as law. Instead, drawing from that confidence in my own vision, I could say, they don't understand what I'm trying to do. I think midlife gives us that. I think it can give us that kind of confidence and a real foundation in our own vision, in our own purpose, and a greater ability to sift through other people's responses.
Yeah, I hear that over and over again, Laura. Yes, it is liberating, I think is the best word for it. Yeah. And you're right, as you continue to creatively grow and expand and evolve, It's people are used to you a certain way or doing things, certain things, and that's not who I am anymore. It's like a snake shedding its skin or a tree like outgrowing its bark. And it's really beautiful, I think, when that happens. But it can also be confusing for our loved ones, but even for ourselves of, but I've always
Yes.
been this or I've always done this. So I think that's a really
Yes.
important piece. Thank you.
Yeah. And people are saying, you used to do that. Why aren't you doing that? There's a photograph that I had done. I can't even remember the circumstances. I was living in Prague in the 90s, and I was in my mid 30s at the time. And or I was in my early 30s. And for some reason, this professional photographer did this photo shoot of me. And anyway, these photos came out so beautiful. And there's people in my family that always are saying, "Oh, we love those photos of you. Those are the best photos. Why don't you wear your hair that way anymore?" Why do Yeah, why don't you they mean it in a very complimentary way, but often there's like, "Why don't you look like that anymore?" And I'm like, "I don't look like that anymore. That was 30 years ago, and I'm not that person anymore. Or I am that person, but I'm an older version of that person." But anyway, that always just cracks me up, this kind of snapshot of something from the past and how, yeah, people might be attached to that.
Absolutely. And not just visually, but in many ways, right? In all our different roles. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, kind of, let's talk a little bit about self care and mindfulness, right? So for
Yeah.
you, what are your self care kind of go to practices? Because I think this is something you're really good at. And so I like to really ask about what practices or rituals help you stay grounded in midlife, because I know you have a lot going on, right? So what are your go tos? I know tea. We love our tea.
We do. We do. So I have a mindfulness practice. I don't even know if it's mindfulness. I don't know what it is. It's a pleasure practice. It has mindfulness components, but it goes into this other territory, and I'm just very in love with it. And it's working for me, and I share it with other people. And if it works for them, I hope that maybe they can take something from it. But the essence of it is that we're trying to find different experiences. They start off, if we start off with a sensory experience, maybe combining several different sensory stimuli so that we can have a kind of combo effect of something nice, like maybe a piece of music and a cup of tea and a square of chocolate and the birds outside. So loading up so that there's a layering effect and hopefully an ability to really immerse ourselves and to become much more embodied. So that is the mindfulness part, but there's a little more intentionality in terms of things that might bring us pleasure, and even opening ourselves and looking for the neurotransmitter response, like a dopamine hit, for instance, a healthy dopamine hit. So that's a foundation, is this sensory experience. And then what I do is, so I set that up. And I do it very simply. I might do it during the course of the day. I might do it with a cup of tea or even a coffee, and give myself, let's say, 5 minutes to just really immerse myself in this experience. Or often I do it in the morning. I get up and use the bathroom and I brush my teeth. And then I go back into bed and I work off of the toothpaste. I work off the taste and the feeling of the toothpaste, which is, I like it. And it's just so basic. It's such a basic pleasure. But so that's the foundation, some kind of a sensory experience, feel good experience. And then I build on that through different kinds of thoughts. And I run through an alphabetical list. And I'd love to offer your listeners a list of 15 different kinds of thoughts. so that they can try it themselves. But these are thoughts that have different kinds of physiological, emotional, but emotional, we're looking at the maybe the physiology of the emotion. And or I'm looking for what is the quality of response if I have this kind of thought. And then I go to the next thought. So I'll give you concrete examples. So one thought is gratitude. This is something that's very commonly used. But I feel like it's kind of the only thing that we're offered in terms of heart opening, in terms of tapping into some kind of, I don't know, like a good positive psychology, but also a good emotional experience that might take us away, for instance, from stress hormones or from anxiety. So I do use gratitude, but then I've got 14 other places that I can go. So another one is pride. So pride is something that, oh, it's one of the 7 deadly sins, I think. It's taboo. It's taboo. But it doesn't need, I don't believe it needs to be taboo. When I'm giving talk, I do keynotes, I use this as an example often. I'm proud of myself for. What are you proud of? What are you proud of yourself for, Kimberly, today?
Today, I would say I am proud of myself for my latest rehearsal of my solo, my ballet solo, and it went quite smoothly despite it being quite challenging. So, yeah. So I'm proud of myself because it's like the choreography is clicking a little better, which is nice.
Yeah. And nice is such a good word because there's something so nice about being able, giving ourselves permission to feel good. Look, there's so many different messages that we get that we've internalized, criticizing ourselves. And so this is, and also criticizing the world, judging people in our lives, whether we know them or not. Judgment is just such a huge part of our makeup, and we're bombarded by it. We really are bombarded by these kinds of thoughts. So these positive thoughts are, yeah, are an antidote to that. But just as there's a vast array of negative thinking that we might engage in over the course of the day, I think that we can expand our palette when it comes to positive thinking, positive thoughts, especially with attention for how they make us feel. Because gratitude, I don't know about you, but gratitude has a different feeling than pride. And relief is a really good one too. That's a strong one. Thich Nhat Hanh's, one of his meditations is, he doesn't say thank God because the Buddhists don't believe in deities. What does he say? Something like, I breathing in, I'm so relieved I don't have a toothache. I'm so happy I don't have a toothache. So there's that sense of relief can also be really beautiful and powerful. I found that one's really strong, especially if you have had a toothache, especially, but just that contrast. Anyway, I do this practice every morning. I get up at 5 o'clock and brush my teeth, come back to bed. And then for about an hour, I just go through all of these different thoughts and play around with different kinds of positive thinking, pleasure. I call them pleasure thoughts because I'm interested in what's the quality of pleasure here with this thought and that thought. And then I do a little manifesting with a few of those thoughts. I kind of group them together. Yeah. Anyway, that's my main ritual.
I love it. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. The other piece I wanted to touch on, and this is a bit of a detour. One thing I've always loved about you, Laura, is like your style, right? And so I'm
Really?
curious.
I'm
Yes,
so
you always have
flattered because
fun.
you are so stylish. Thank you.
You're kind. But yeah, it's like I've always just loved your vibe. And so I'm curious. how your style has shifted in midlife and what are your go-tos that you're like, okay, I always want to have this. I think our thing is always like red lips and barrettes, you and I. But I'm
Yes.
curious, like what, and scars. Sometimes you've got scars. But
Yeah, I love scarves.
what would you say is like your formula maybe for midlife style?
Yes, that's such a great question. The waist is an issue in midlife for me. The waist tends to disappear. My waist has, and I never had a great waist anyway. I'm short waisted and all my weight is around the middle. So there's less waist. And so maybe more attention to how I can accentuate that. I think that I was going to say something about shorter skirts, but I hesitate because I guess like very little girl type of things I used to really adore, and I still adore them. Let's say like a super mini skirt with an A line, but like really frilly going out to the side, and a little pair of flats with little anklet socks, that kind of thing I used to wear when I was younger. But I feel like some of that is not quite right anymore. But I say I hesitate because I really abhor those lists of things you're supposed to wear over 40, things you're not supposed to wear over 40, over 50. Now I'm over 60. I'm like, I want to wear whatever I want. And so I think for midlife, I'm, I guess I'm looking for what is going to, yeah, be as flattering as it can. Shoes are also a thing because my feet are not the same in terms of ability to wear heels. So I'm always looking for the perfect pair of comfort shoes or boots. I'm a boot freak, but that do have some bit of a heel. But overall, I want to say, Kimberly, I feel like my style has not really changed much in the last 30 years. And sometimes I see people who are quite elderly and they're holding on to that style that they had back in whatever it was, the 50s, let's say, or even the 40s. And I'm like, wow, you're not updating, huh? And so that's going to be me.
I think when you find what works for you, does it really go out of style or does it really become outdated? And the great thing about mini skirts too, when I was in Paris recently, I got one like a faux leather mini skirt, a little
Mm.
A-line one. And okay, I will never wear it without tights, but it's like I needed it for the Lenny Kravitz concert and I was like, I'm getting this. And
Oh,
it's fun. Like I don't really wear mini skirts, but I'm like, I'm owning
right.
this. So it's like it shifts. Okay, maybe you wore a lot of mini skirts and maybe now you wear mini skirts with tights, or instead of the stiletto heels, we're wearing more clunky heels or flats. So you can still have the same kind of look and vibe, but it
Right.
just we're seeking a little more comfort, stretchy waists.
Yeah, I think maybe just I think the same style, but yeah, maybe a little bit more comfort.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, comfort is key.
Yeah.
I'm curious. The one thing I wanted to ask about too with health and wellness is skincare for
Yeah.
you. So, what have you found? Because it always shocks me to hear that you were in your 60s. You always have to remind me because I think you're my age. So what's your secret? What's your skincare secret?
Ooh, I was about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I was hanging out with mutual friend, Stephanie Donnie, and her skin was looking amazing. And I'm like, what is going on? And she's told me that her son was really into TikTok videos, finding out about particularly Korean skincare. And so I'm like, okay, I'm coming over and show me every single product and I'm going to go buy it. So I did that. I bought all these products and they were very inexpensive products. And I found that they did make a difference. And so not 100% of them were Korean products. Most of them were, but a couple of them were not. But anyway, the And then I did get some retinol over the counter, not well, over the counter, we can say. I get some retinol from I buy it at my dermatologist's office, but it's just a regular company. It's not prescription. So I guess the gold standard is retinol and then some kind of moisture retaining something and then a moisturizer and sunscreen. So I just do that, but I take it another level in terms of how many products I use. So there's an eye cream that I found that I absolutely love that's made by Clou de Peau, which is they're owned by Shiseido. It's a Japanese company. Anyway, it's the only eye cream that I found that really absorbs enough for me. And it's very expensive, like a regular size, like this size is like $300 for yeah, so it's very expensive, but it lasts forever. And all my other skincare is very inexpensive. But I found that it's just finding under the umbrella of the retinol and the thing that's going to help you retain moisture and the moisturizer. I found that I just needed to find like what works for my skin, and that I really like a million products just because they all do something slightly different. And yeah, I think it's okay. I'm surprised. I went to buy something the other day, and I don't know if my birthday was in the system because I had shopped at this place before. Because the woman there who was in her 50s, she kept saying, "You look great." I'd only met her like once before, years and years before, and I had no makeup on. Like, it was a very windy day. I just ran out to get this thing. And she's like, "You kept saying you look great." And I'm like, she must be looking at my birthday. Like, people don't usually comment.
Well, you know what's so funny, Laura, is I had someone last week say to me, "You must have been really pretty when you were younger." I'm gonna have to write about this because she meant it. Yeah, she just didn't really have a filter. But I was like,
Oh
oh
my
my
gosh.
gosh, it's so funny what people say. So I
Yes,
love that you were getting compliments on how you looked for
I
being.
know. But then midlife gives us license. Sometimes in the
Yeah,
moment we don't think of it, but gives
yeah.
us license perhaps to go, and I'm still really pretty.
I was just like, uh-huh. I'm like, I have to process this one in my journal.
Yes, yes, yes.
My
Yeah, some
last
people
question,
just don't get it.
no, is and it was a funny moment and it'll give me some fodder for writing. But my last question for you, Miss Laura, is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And I think we've done a really good job of talking through the ways in which you find tranquility in your everyday with all your rituals and whatnot. But I'm curious if there's anything we've missed or that you want to share with listeners really about your journey to midlife and pleasure and tranquility.
Yes, yes, I'd love to share. So I have I'm calling it a movement because I can. Call
Right. Because I can.
Yeah, you can be pretentious, especially over 60. You can be pretentious. Yeah, so I call it pleasure literacy because I was looking for a word that would encompass the work that I still do as a sexuality educator, sexual solutions coach, that would encompass this empowerment of women. I do consent education on campuses working with all genders, encompass that, and also this new area I was moving into, which was talking about everyday pleasures as a way to seek tranquility and also resilience. Also resilience. And so this question is something that I ask myself, not just every day, but throughout the day. Because yes, I have a lot of stressors in my life. My husband's pretty ill, and that's the biggest stressor right now for me. And so it's a challenge on a day-to-day basis, but also on a moment-to-moment basis, depending on what comes up, how I'm going to find my tranquility. How I'm going to find my tranquility. So I have found in addition to this morning practice that I described earlier in terms of grounding myself and giving myself an array of pleasure thoughts that I hopefully can turn to throughout the day, I found some other techniques. And one of these techniques is something I just call proportion. And that's making pleasure proportional to pain. And what it entails practically is just being able to, I guess it's the same kind of thing, sensitizing myself to what delights are around me, but not just when I'm sitting in a dedicated place and I've given myself all kinds of lovely things. I put on the music and I write and I'm having my tea and I'm having my square of chocolate. That's a practice. But I'm talking about as I'm going about my day and something really disturbs me, right? Or frightens me. There's also so much chaos in the world right now. And so on a moment to moment basis, there's all of that, all of those emotions. And so I found that by identifying first, but just acknowledging, okay, I've got a ton of emotions right now, a lot of pain. I'll put that label on what could be terror and fear and fury and a ton of things all together in a ball that is threatening to or wants to make me feel bad, right? Wants to make me feel bad, or I'm tempted to really lean into that and feel really bad. So what I do is I acknowledge that, acknowledge the feelings, feel the feelings to whatever extent I can, and then I look for what is the pleasure in my midst that I can use to balance this out somehow. And I trained myself to do this. So it really was a bit of rewiring of the brain. But I think we can all do this because of the plasticity of the brain. Many of us are looking for all the horrible things going on in the world and our lives. And there's many reasons why we do that. Some of them just instinctual or primal, right? Looking for the negative. But I think we can also look for not just the positive, but the delightful. What is the sun doing right now? Oh, it's raining right now. Huh. I like that. Yeah, I've got a lamp in front of me. I chose this lamp. I bought it. So it already, some things are predisposed to being delightful because we made a choice at some point, right? To say, oh my God, look at that shade. I just have to take that home. So in the house, we can do that. But outside, there's nature and there's kindness. And I think we can also find, and there's tasty things outside, even more tasty things maybe. And even if you don't want to have that chocolate croissant, you can walk in and smell that chocolate croissant. So I think I found that my tranquility is very much attached to this ability that I've cultivated and continue to cultivate on a daily basis just to level out some of those stress hormones, or maybe even overpower them with these other hormones, these happiness hormones, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. All of those can be stimulated by these lovely sensory experiences.
Beautiful. I love that, Laura. Thank you. And it's a wonderful reminder. It's a grounding practice for our mental health too, to be able to notice the senses, and it helps bring us back to the present. So thank you so much. And I appreciate all your wisdom. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I love all the questions and the tulips.